going to introduce Dominik from Wings. What they are doing is a systematic and scientific approach to the creation of decentralized autonomous organizations. That's a very hot topic, but at the same time very controversial, because Ethereum tried to do that with the DAO, and they failed. So after that, I mean, they failed. We all going to do trial and error. That's part of the process. No, it's not a bad thing. But it's interesting that now new people is trying to approach the same problem with a more systematic and scientific approach. So I think it's a very interesting topic because it might be the future of democracies and a new type of governance for society. So if you want to stay, you're invited to hear Dominik.
Aclaro, el coffee break existe, ¿sí? Nosotros vamos a seguir de acá hasta el final, ¿ok? Si los que se quieren quedar, bien esto, si no, vuelven después del coffee break, decisión de ustedes, ¿ok? Pero seguimos hasta el final.
Dominik, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you. Thank you again for Diego and the whole Rootstock team for inviting me, as well as Michael from EasyBit for hosting me. Really appreciate it, and very happy to be here in Buenos Aires for the first time. So Wings is basically a project governance platform that's basically meant for social crowdfunding using incentivized forecasting. And what the bigger vision of all this is basically to create a globally inclusive platform for secured project finance, for decentralized governance, and also for decision support, which is using the incentivized forecasting or forecast or prediction markets. Basically, the way that this system works is that someone would come in and make a proposal, like you would have made a proposal to the DAO, and then there's an opportunity for people that are part of the Wings DAO to give feedback to the project initiators. After that is finished, there's a forecast period, and this forecast period is very important because what we're trying to do here is send out signals to the market of whether a particular project is valuable or not valuable, or is it a scam. This is very important because, like, the people here, we probably have time to spend 5 hours looking at a project or more, but if we want to go mainstream and we want these technologies to get adopted by many, many more people, our friends and family that maybe are not that into Bitcoin or technology, they have to have some way to see, like, what does the crowd think of a particular project? Is it good or bad? In traditional finance, we go to banks and we'll go to, let's say, Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs will tell us, hey, this company, Uber, is a great company, you should buy the IPO of that stock, right? But for the decentralized projects, we don't really have a mechanism like that. Right, so once the forecast period is finished, there's a promotion period, and the Wings DAO members can also participate, and the projects can tap into those members to promote the project so that they get more users as well as getting the funding. So after the funding is finished, then what happens is there's a monitoring period and also a resolution and reward period. So if the forecast was done, so there's a bunch of people that forecast, and if you are more correct in your forecast, you get more of a reward as a Wings DAO member. And so the project DAOs will be given a choice of how much of their crowdfunding they want to allocate to the forecasters. So in this case, right now what we have it set at is 5%, that's the suggested rate. And so the forecasters are actually competing for that percentage. And if they are more correct, then they get rewarded, basically. So then once the project DAOs are running, then we'll also design a governance system for those DAOs that can also use Wings to basically iterate and improve, right? So there's a concept, there's a game called Nomic, and this is basically a way to kind of set up a constitution and bylaws and laws where a system can continually improve and get feedback. One cool thing that we've thought about to do with this is also use the forecasting function to allow for governance decisions. So it's not about, like, do I want A or B? The question really is is A or B more profitable, right? And really that's, at the end of the day, for any economic system, that's what it's about. We're supposed to be bringing value, not whether we agree with something or not. It's more about, does it bring value to that system or doesn't it bring value to that system? And so basically, there's this trend now that's happening, and Fred from Coinbase spoke about it in an article in the Wall Street Journal last month, and there's a shift now away from the old business models of a corporation and a hierarchy to more decentralized business models where we don't need centralized companies anymore. And so there's a lot of advantages to that. You've got the decentralized advantage where you are basically supranational, so you're not your corporation isn't based in America or in Russia or China, it's all over the world. And that needs effective governance when you have a business system that's running across 160 plus countries. It also needs an immutable ledger to be able to transact on that. Because if, for example, if you think of like a larger corporation, if they were, let's say, in Venezuela, and Venezuela takes away their properties, right? You can't do that with immutable ledgers, basically. Like the virtual assets and the virtual networks are still there. So that's a very important part. Transparency also is a very important part. And if you think about the current companies that are out there, they report every quarter. They make a report to their investors, right? And so every quarter you see the numbers and that sort of thing. But with the opportunity that we have with blockchain is that investors can see in real time like what is going on with a project, right? Is it getting more users? Is it getting more funds? Is it getting use? Is it getting adoption? These things we can show in real time, and that's a huge advantage over a traditional company. It also means that you can increase trust with the stakeholders involved in that economic system, and also that it's auditable not just by the internal people or KPMG, but anyone can look at the transactions and see, is that system functioning as promised, right? And also with the autonomy is important because it's just reducing cost, the less human errors as long as the code is obviously tested and all that. And so you get some efficiency gain from the automation that's been happening in industry for like the last 200 years, right? So even if you think about like ERP systems, 50, 40, 70 years ago, they were paper-based basically, right? People were using abacus, digital calculators didn't exist yet, and over time things get automated in the business administration process. And this is basically, this technology is just a structural technology that is bringing more efficiency to how a business is run. And so what we're doing is we're focusing heavily on the interface to this, because it's great that the technology exists, but if the average person wants to get involved or use one of these systems and interact with it, that hasn't really worked out so well yet. Like when the DAO came out, it was very, very difficult for people to actually vote. They had to download things. There's just it has to become a lot easier. So we're focusing first on a web interface, which if you guys go back there by the EasyBit booth, I can show you a pre-alpha version I have, and also a chatbot interface so that people will be able to communicate with a chatbot to forecast, to give recommendations and feedback to a DAO, or do other kind of governance decisions. And then later on, in maybe next year or the following year, we'll also be looking to integrate with IBM and artificial intelligence for doing machine learning and taking a lot of the data on the Wings blockchain, or well, the RSK blockchain, and being able to use the AI to give people recommendations so that if they don't necessarily feel comfortable and making a forecast, they could actually offload that work to something like Watson. And the important things for us was that when we started out, we thought we were going to use Ethereum. And we do plan to support multiple blockchains, but after what happened with the DAO, we decided like, hey, RSK and the federation that they've set up is a huge advantage, because people want to have the comfort that it's so early on in this that there still has to be some manual involvement. So having the federation and having these 25 partners, I think for us is a huge advantage. And so we're really happy to do that, as well as the fact that the first DAOs that use Wings are going to be able to accept Bitcoin as well. And so one of the big concepts that we have is basically this delegated voting and forecasting. So one of the issues with the DAO was that when there was a vote, only like 1% of the total holders voted, even when the vote was about fixing the code so that the money wouldn't get lost. So that's really odd, and so we thought, okay, there has to be delegated voting that if someone owns some Wings tokens, but they don't have time, or they don't have time to research, they can delegate their vote to an expert, right? There was some criticism of the DAO that basically venture capitalists are better at evaluating projects, and so in this case, if someone doesn't feel comfortable, they can actually go to a venture capitalist that may be using Wings and delegate his vote to her, you know? And then the other concept is the concept of swarm intelligence and forecast markets. And what that means is the swarm intelligence concept, it's pretty old. I mean, it's been around for maybe, I don't know, like 20 years, I think, 15 years. And basically, it's the fact that like the decisions that people make as a group are going to be different than the decisions they make alone, right? And so using forecast markets and basically the power of the crowd, that they should be able to forecast correctly if a potential project is a scam, or if it's a $1 million idea or a $50 million idea. And so the reason why all this is happening and why we're focusing on this is because there's basically a trend in society that's going from, if you think like, I don't know, 10,000 years back, you had only physical enforcement. There was no governments or anything like that, right? Then there's always social enforcement when you have a group of people. You don't need laws for that. It's just common agreement among people. And then when you have the development of city and nation states, you have the evolution of legal contract enforcement systems. But what's happening now with Bitcoin, as the prime example, is that we have enforcement of contracts, of machine contracts using math, right? And so this is just like an evolutionary trend in society that's happening, and it now is resulting in, I think that's the reason why we see all these coins. There's like 600 or 700 coins at least out there, a lot more projects that people are thinking about that haven't even come out. And so there's an issue of, there's all these projects, but which ones actually deserve attention, which ones deserve our time, which ones deserve funding, that sort of thing. And so Wings tries to identify the correct projects. That's basically what it's about, and providing them with support. And so we're using basically, Wings is also a DAO, so we're using this concept of crowds to be able to identify and collaboration and coordination of resources to the correct projects, so that eventually we'll be able to find the one project that is the best one out of all, and focus energy and resources into those types of projects. So where is Wings now? We're right now in pre-alpha. We have a pre-alpha version, so we've integrated with IPFS, and we have some basic smart contracts running on an Ethereum testnet, which we'll be converting over to and testing on RSK very soon. This actually took us a lot longer than we thought. The legal framework was a real pain in the butt, but we've spent, I think, the last 4 months speaking to lawyers and interviewing different firms, and we basically have finalized that in the last few weeks. We've got 5 mainstream companies that will have committed to taking their DAOs on Wings in early 2017. One of them is actually, I think we'll be announcing them sometime in the next week or two, and it's like a fairly large peer-to-peer video company. So they have like 2 million users, and we're very excited that they chose to use Wings. And we've been focusing on community development, because to do the forecasting correctly, it can't be 10 people, right? It's got to be a lot of people getting input from different fields, different expertise levels, especially if the projects are all over the place. You want to have a very diverse group of people to do the forecasting. And so we've developed the email list, which now has over 8,000 people, IM groups in English, Chinese, and Russian with over 2,000 people, and as well as some international advisors where we've got our blog and white papers translated in Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, Russian, Indonesian, Filipino, and probably a few other, Dutch as well, and a few other languages. And we've just released a white paper about a month and a half ago, as well as a scientific white paper, so you can go on wings.ai and download that. And on November 18th, we're going to start the donation-based crowdfunding campaign, which will last for 49 days. And so we've basically broken down Wings into 5 milestones. And so in the earliest version, the DAO governance will be very basic, direct DAO governance. We're taking this step by step because obviously we can't build everything at the same time and super fast. We want to make sure everything's working. In goal number 2, we basically enable delegated DAO governance, which you saw on the slide earlier, where people can delegate their vote. And we also have a bounty portal that we've been using with Wings that we've developed that will basically be a DApp as well that the projects can use to reward people that want to get involved. And in goal 3, that one is very important because it has the future-archy forecasting-based voting as well as cross-blockchain support. So right now we'll be working on rootstock, but in the future we want to also connect into Ethereum and other blockchains so that if a project is doing crowdfunding, they can take funds from multiple sources. And then in goal 4, which is probably about 18 to 24 months out, we'll also be developing a feeless Wings blockchain. So for some of the communication, like the feedback and things like that, we want to lower the cost for that, and so that it'll be able to scale. So that's there, as well as the AI-assisted decision-making. And then this is basically kind of like a system architecture diagram of what Wings looks like. You have the interface layer on top with the chatbots, the web, as well as the AI interface. And then at the application level, basically what you have is like the Wings DAO application, which is basically the forecasting and the governance of the Wings DAO. And then on the right, you have the project DAO applications, which are, again, the direct governance, the delegated governance, and the future-archy-based governance, as well as the bounty management, DApp, and the funding and smart contract-based escrow services. And then below that just shows the layers that it's actually color-coded. So red is milestone 1, yellow is milestone 2, purple 3, and milestone 4 is blue. So for the smart contract layer, we'll be supporting rootstock first, then the EVM, and then others later on. In the beginning, also, obviously, the rootstock federation, then cross-blockchain communications, and then in actually goal 5 is privacy or private DAOs as well that we would like to work on. And then these are the networks that are supported, which starting with Bitcoin through RSK, and then Ethereum, and then later on with the Wings feeless chain as well. So the next steps for us are basically the crowdfunding on November 18th. We'll be announcing some partnerships, which Rootstock is one of them, and some other partners in China and Russia as well. And then announce the first DAOs in the next few weeks. Release the MVP in early January. Basically, we hope to have it running a few weeks after Rootstock is in production because like 2 or 3 of these DAOs were basically wanted to start crowdfunding yesterday. So we got to get a move on that. So thank you very much. I really appreciate coming here to present to you all. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Yes?
One of the challenges with DAO projects is investing in on-chain assets.
Yes.
So if the on-chain asset is fine, people are going to do it as a DAO. How are you going to solve the governance of non-chain assets?
Right. So the question is, how do you solve the governance of non-chain assets? But in the case of non-chain assets, what it is there is still an advantage to using DAOs and forecasting for those types of businesses because basically in that case, think of the project DAO as sort of like the board of directors, right? And so,
That's just the first phase selection. So we don't go all the way.
well, in the cases of like physical items, then there is obviously a physical limitation there. So, unless you have like full on, it probably will be possible to make some kind of self-contained physical item that only reacts to the blockchain. But yeah. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.